Welcome back to Arise News Hour. I'm Charles Aniagolda. Now, Zimbabwe's main opposition group has called off anti-government protests in the capital Harare at the last minute after failing to overturn a police ban. However, protesters who had already gathered in the city were violently dispersed by police. Several were hurt. The opposition said the ban exposed the fascist government's true colors. The demonstration was called in protest at the government's handling of the economy, but police said they had evidence it could turn violent. There's a heavy police presence and the city centre is subdued with most shops closed. According to the UN, about 5 million Zimbabweans are in need of food aid.
Zimbabwe is not open for democracy. Zimbabwe is not open for justice. Zimbabwe is not open for constitutionalism and rule of law. And more importantly, Zimbabwe is not open for business. It's so clear, it is known, not only to have an illegitimate regime in this country, we have a rogue regime, because you can't have a constitutional order where a government chooses to deploy armed people against its own civilians.
On Zimbabwe, it's a fast-changing situation. I understand today's planned protests have just been called off. Following a High Court decision earlier this morning upholding a government ban on the demonstrations that was announced yesterday. However, with opposition demonstrations still likely to take place in Zimbabwe in the near future, we urge the government to find ways to continuously engage with the population about their legitimate grievances on the economic situation and to stop cracking down on peaceful protesters. If such demonstrations go ahead, we urge the security forces and protesters to ensure they proceed calmly and without any violence. We're deeply concerned by the socio-economic crisis that continues to unfold in Zimbabwe. While acknowledging efforts made by the government, the international community and the UN in Zimbabwe to mitigate the effects of the crisis and reform process, the dire economic situation is now impacting negatively on the realization of economic and social rights of millions of Zimbabweans.
Well, for more on the developments in Zimbabwe, I'm joined now by the African Affairs analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing, John Ofei-Ansah. Good to see you, John. What's the latest that you're hearing about those protests, which we understand were called off, but several hundred protesters still went out onto the streets in defiance, and some of them were severely beaten by police?
Yes, your report is correct. You know, in view of the court ruling, the opposition decided to call off the protests. But like you said, some still went ahead, you know, to protest, and it resulted in a clash with the police. You know, some of whom the police used tear gas and batons, and it resulted in some injuries on the part of the protesters. But according to the MDC, the opposition MDC, the ban wouldn't stop them from protesting in other cities of the country, apart from Harare next week.
And the ostensible reason for these protests is, according to the opposition, Mr. Mnangagwa's poor handling of the economy. Is it your sense that President Mnangagwa's policies are failing and flailing badly, as one opposition politician put it?
Yes, I think the government, Mnangagwa, actually, I believe, well, he was part of the previous administration, you know, but, you know, I think he's a victim, in my opinion, a victim of circumstances, because Zimbabwe's current problems go back over a decade. You know, after the land reform program, which resulted in the West imposing sanctions, you know, on the country. So this is the long-term effects, you know, of what happened a decade ago, and it's not helped. The situation is also not helped by the incessant drought. I mean, the experience of drought this year, you know, resulting in the country calling for food aid about a couple of weeks ago. And as you said in your program, more than about 7.5 million people depend on food aid, and thousands more can't even eat daily. Okay, so the problems, cannot, be solved, overnight. But again, having said that, the system of patronage, in the country, especially within the ruling party, and the impunity, and the corruption, that runs through, doesn't help matters either. And again, it is compounded by, let's go back to last August after the elections when the opposition protested against the results, and those protests were met by high-handedness by the security agencies that resulted in the deaths of a few of the protesters, right? So that actually gave the lie to what Mnangagwa, had been saying, that he was going to be a reformist, and that Zimbabwe was open for business and so on and so forth. So that gave the lie to it. But having said that again, the government, Mnangagwa, needs to, though he has called for dialogue with the opposition MDC and the opposition leader Nelson Chamisa, but Chamisa is refusing, to sit down with Mnangagwa without an independent arbiter. So the government, the country is facing a myriad problems.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, clearly you understand the country. You've covered Zimbabwe for many years. In fact, you lived there at one point, if I understand correctly. And there are so many times when it felt as though the country has pretty much reached rock bottom, and then it goes down even further. I mean, how much further down can Zimbabwe go? Or is there no such thing as rock bottom in Zimbabwe?
Well, I don't see how low, how further low it can get. In fact, yesterday the finance minister, the respected Cambridge trade economist, Professor Ngube, has come up with some new measures that actually, in the interim, is going to squeeze, Zimbabweans even harder. But if those measures are properly implemented, we'll see, a light at the end of the tunnel in the short to medium term, or the medium, if not the short term.
So, what are the opposition MDC proposing beyond going out onto the streets to protest? Because they appear to want nothing short of Emmerson Mnangagwa leaving his post as president and handing over to the opposition leader Nelson Chamisa, who they say can attract foreign investment. But that won't happen, will it?
No, that is pie in the sky, because Mnangagwa came to power through the ballot box. Whether elections were fair or not, he is an elected president for a 5-year term. So the MDC will have to wait to the end of the term to contest and see if they can win and come to power and attract the investment they claim they are capable of. But for now, but resorting to violence, you see, resorting to violence against the government, is seditious, is treasonous. Though I do not blame the people. Look, the people are hungry. And I always say that, or the common say that a hungry man is an angry man. Okay, so the best thing, in my opinion, for the government to do is to try and come to dialogue, or for both sides to do is to come to a dialogue, or if need be, maybe set up sort of a government of national unity. Put heads together and find a common solution to the massive problem, confronting the country at present.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time, but President Mnangagwa going to Dar es Salaam to the summit of the South African Development Community, SADC. He's likely to be given, from what I understand, the chairmanship of part of that organization, the bit that deals with politics, defense and security. Why is the Zimbabwe people's opposition to the president not getting support from regional countries?
if he is due to occupy these positions within SADC, as you rightly said. So to deny him, of those positions within SADC will be, will send the wrong message, will send the wrong signals. That as if the SADC members do not, or they are interfering with Zimbabwe's internal affairs. So I mean that is a no-no. I mean he is due. I think it's Zimbabwe's turn to take chairmanship of these positions. So irrespective of the situation in Zimbabwe, I think he has to take up those positions. But the best the SADC can do is to maybe talk to Mnangagwa behind the scenes, to try and and find solutions to the situation.
Okay, John Ofei-Ansah, always appreciate your analysis. John Ofei-Ansah, of course, the publisher of Africa Briefing, and he is an African affairs analyst. Now, a Frenchman known for carrying out several unauthorized climbs of skyscrapers around the globe has scaled a 62-story building in Hong Kong. Alain Robert's stunt this morning was part of a move to appeal for peace during weeks of anti-government protests over a proposed extradition bill. The 57-year-old, dubbed Spiderman, ascended to the top of Chong Kong Center in about an hour and unveiled a banner which featured both the Chinese and Hong Kong flags on the facade of the landmark. You're watching Arise News Hour, plenty more still ahead, including Gabon's Ali Bongo makes his first public appearance in 10 months. More on that when we come back. Stay with us.